Hi, everyone. I'm 𝗟𝗶𝗴𝗶𝗏𝗂, and I want to welcome you to a special edition of Digital Dialogue, where we're going to highlight just a few of the episodes from the last 6 months. Normally, I'm behind the scenes as a producer in this production studio. Our very first episode showed us why it's absolutely necessary to have someone in that role. Let's take a look at what happened.
Great question, Wendy. And part of my answer will be found in the backdrop for my video contribution today. I'm actually in the car on a road trip that was unexpected completely due to a business emergency that I need to manage back in Cincinnati. But
right on.
And I just want to let you guys know that unfortunately I have a draining battery on my laptop. If I happen to drop before the call is over, I have my wireless mobile device and I will rejoin. So I just want to let everyone know, and I do apologize for the theatrics. It's not my usual style.
Well, Mark, it's not a rotary phone. It's a transformative device that lets you do stuff on the
Exactly.
Awesome.
Exactly. Yeah.
Just to illustrate the digital world.
Right?
Awesome. Thanks, Mark. Perfect.
I would just add, I think, Robert, I would wave the book around as well, but I think it's in my trunk. And I've got my cell phone mobile hotspot going and my laptop battery draining. So let me just say this.
Oh, only.
Well, the good news is Rob got his wish. Mark's battery managed to last to the end of the show. Now, when we start every single episode, we warn all our guests beforehand that they're essentially on live TV and stuff happens. And when it does, you need to just keep going. The good news is we get to hide some of that with special effects. Isn't that right, John? Absolutely. Why don't you let me take it from here? So, as I said, welcome to Digital Dialogue, special episode. Let me introduce you to the host who you see at the beginning of every single episode, Dr. Frank Granito. Hello, Frank.
John, that was a really cool surprise on live TV. I didn't expect that. First of all, you really surprised me with that one, and you do a magnificent job as producer. I tell you what, it's absolutely fantastic. Thanks a lot. I got a good laugh.
Well, good. That was the intent. It was to give everyone an idea of what you can do with special effects. So I wanted to introduce Frank. You've seen him at the beginning of every episode, and I've known Frank for quite a few years, and I keep discovering more and more about him. And I've come to think of Frank as a Renaissance man, kind of one of those people who can do anything if they put their mind to it. So just to recap a little bit, Frank's a musician. He was in a band. He played baseball for a while. He went to law school. He finally settled for a government career, I'm sure at the urging of his parents to finally pick something. But even that wasn't enough for him. During that time, he went and got his doctorate in management and organizational theory. And when he left, he basically found us at the Institute. But of course, as with the government, we weren't enough. So he went back to school and just recently graduated culinary school as a chef. But the thing that he's done that's probably most relevant to Digital Dialogue is he's a member of the Screen Actors Guild. So with that said, Frank, have a great show.
Gee whiz, John, I don't know what to do. I think that's it. I'm ready to sign off. Well, as John said, it is live TV and we go on with the show. I love that opening. And where the battery's draining in the car, and so that there was clearly a digital solution to getting this dialogue going, and it didn't mean technology. Yes, he had technology, but be able to be agile enough to have a couple of different things there. Maybe go into the trunk, get the book, or use a hotspot. Very agile in that, but. Fantastic. Before we get to our first clip that we're going to do on strategy to reality, I want to bring in Rob Field. Rob, John will let you in now. There you go. How you doing?
Hey, Frank.
I should say that there was another reference in there that you were caught on camera, but we won't talk about that because it is live TV. So our next clip, Rob, you want to talk a little bit about yourself before we get into the next clip briefly?
Sure, I'd like to. So I'm Rob Field. I'm with a company called Press Department. We're a global manufacturer. And people have asked me if I would do anything else besides what I do, which is providing digital transformation. Digital transformation is business transformation using technology as a disruptor. And I've always fantasized about being a chef. Hearing today that you've been through culinary school, Frank, and heading down to Baltimore, Maryland area this weekend, I might stop by for something to eat. So be prepared.
Please do. Please do. I just, I have a couple of private dinners going on that I actually get paid for. So that's pretty cool. Well, I'm finding out there's a lot of people who aspire to be a professional chef. I guess that's pretty cool.
It's too much work for me.
Yeah, it is.
This is easy.
You can make it. Not everybody's 𝗵𝒂𝒂𝒊𝒂𝗶, and that's a lot of glamour there. But believe me, it's a lot of mess behind the scenes. So we're going to do our first clip here. But let me set it up. It's a clip on strategy to reality. Basically, a continuation of the outtake you saw at the top of the show. There's some great practical advice to turn strategy into reality. So often we have great plans, but they don't always turn into results. So why don't we roll that clip, John?
But I'm a longtime practitioner, thought leader, educator, community builder in this idea of helping organizations to do strategy to execution well from end to end. Particularly because I see many organizations, especially large ones, are challenged to take their defined strategies and turn them into results in a way that is coordinated and prioritized across products and business units. And I'm very passionate about getting the whole set of teams to work together, from strategy to architecture, to planning, to solution, to operation, the whole chain. But I've been especially focused on the role of business architecture. And a business architecture is simply a comprehensive blueprint of an organization that helps to inform strategy, to translate strategy, and to really connect the dots from strategy to execution. That blueprint also helps us to design or redesign our organizations with intent and for agility and resilience, and it helps us to make better, more informed decisions.
A quintessential New Yorker. I want the business, whenever they have a problem, to come to me, and this is my CXO concept, Chief Execution Officer, rather than, and there's nothing wrong with a CIO, but it comes with trust and execution on the business's strategy. I want the business to come to say, the CIO, he's one of us. Right. I mean, if you're from New York or Chicago or anyone who's seen a mafia movie from back in the day, that's how we solve problems. We solve problems collectively together, not in silos. And we all come to the table, and I want to hear what the business is doing. Most of the time, they have less resources than they do time, and we're there as the API for the business. We're there to learn their business and do the best we can to help bring those business units together. So ultimately, it's by partnership, it's by gaining the trust, and it's by really having a sit down to make sure that we all are on the same page, moving that strategy forward and building the trust as we have full transparency and build that plan, or that executing on their plan together to get to a better solution collectively.
And he posited, his idea was that the business architecture existed before IT. And the goal of IT, or the role of IT, was to really come alongside and understand and digitally architect the business capabilities that would accelerate the raison d'etre, the reason the company was. The essentiality of Whynde's message of strategy to reality is that once you have the alignment of the technology leaders and the business leaders to what has to happen in order for the company to be successful in the next 2 decades, for example, then you've got to figure out how to do the organizational and cultural change management necessary to align the arms and legs on both sides of that equation to execute and sort of land the triple axle.
I like one of the comments that was flashing up there, that business is technology and technology is business. I think that's sort of a nice way to capture some of the spirit of what we're saying here. A great question on how can the strategist ensure the business architecture isn't entirely aligned with the anticipated strategy. And I think there's such an interesting partnership here, isn't there? There's, as a strategy is being formulated, the business architecture helps us to understand our capabilities and what we can do today and what the impacts of what that might be. And likewise, once the strategy gets formulated, we can do the translation, but still always working hand in hand back to the strategy. So I think the answer to that question is it's true partnership that needs to be in place. But
so, Rob, I was enthralled being a New York Italian. We'll get to that other part in a second, but the aligning the arms and legs of the culture in order to land that triple axle really resonated with me. But your comment, and I know a lot of it was tongue in cheek, but the chief execution officer, which I thought was really interesting. And I know you were tongue in cheek on the New York Mafia references, but can you elaborate a little bit on the chief execution officer and how things might have changed in your organization since we actually did that dialogue?
So I'm happy to, Frank. And it's just a euphemism for the growth of the role of the CIO, right? And you hear a lot of it lately. Ironically, we were discussing this the other day. Some of my peers, CIO, CDO, CTO, and someone even brought up Chief AI Officer. It's just a tool to say the business is driving what our needs are. We don't roll out technology for the sake of technology. And my concept around the idea of a chief execution officer aligns with what Wendy's book talks about. There is a strategy that somebody has to build. And traditionally, IT, from an operational perspective, was to keep the lights on and email and electricity. But now that we're partnering with the business and gaining their trust and building solutions that the business needs and not just rolling out technology for the sake of technology, we can execute on somebody else's strategy. We can leave the arrogance at home. We can leave the idea that technology is not the most important thing in the room. It's just the thing that helps everybody get to where they need to go. And I do think it comes with a high level of emotional intelligence. It doesn't have to be my idea. It has to be our solution based on a collective strategy. And that's where I come up with that idea of we need to do this together. Technology is the disruptor, but not the strategy.
Yeah, and that's interesting. We talk about the execution officer, and also you mentioned the CDO or the chief digital officer. And I think we're trying to get a digital dialogue on one of our future shows to talk about the CDO and what that means. But a great clip, great discussion. I really enjoyed that. Before we set up our next clip, I'd like to bring in Jessica Carroll into the discussion real quick, please. Thank you. Hi, Jessica. Jessica is one of our Institute Fellows. And Jessica, say a few syllables about yourself, if you don't mind.
Well, first of all, I just want to say it's just lovely to see you guys. Glad to be having this chat with you both. Yes, I've been a fellow for quite a bit. I've been a longtime IT practitioner. Was CIO at the kind of end of my IT practitioner career. I made a turn and jumped into much more customer-facing roles as head of customer success, currently the chief experience officer at a managed services company. All of that wrapped together comes down to my philosophy has always been the customer is at the core, the center of all that we do, the reason we exist. So we need to keep that in mind and be aligned to what's really delighting them and driving, the outcomes that they're after. So that's what I would say is kind of where my head sits all the time.
Excellent. We love having you as a fellow. It's a lot of smart people, a lot of people that are smarter than I am, which is always really very good to be around people who are smarter than I am, and we lift all boats. Our second clip is about the role of service management and digital transformation. So there are really a bunch of nuggets in this, so I want you to pay attention, not the least of which is picking out the difference between what I call terminal value versus instrumental value. And we'll talk a little bit about that on the other side. So go ahead, John, roll this clip.
Hello and welcome. Today we're going to be talking about the role of service management in digital transformation. Digital transformation consists of true organizational change and business that's enabled by digital tools. Service management can guide and accelerate digital transformation with practices and governance that are independent of specific vendors and tools. In this digital dialogue, we'll discuss the current role and future advantages of good service management and the organization's roadmap for digital transformation. What does service management contribute to the organization that can be valuable in transformation efforts?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me on the show. Secondly, yeah, I used to describe myself as somebody that does this for a living. In other words, I make mistakes all day and then I write about it and talk about it, after hours at conferences and whatnot. So there's probably not a mistake that can be done in service management that I haven't explored. Right. So when we talk about digital transformation, that's taking us on this journey to some place that we haven't been before. I mean, it really is truly different. And there's been a lot of doors opened by technology and by transforming how organizations interact, the very nature and makeup of organizations. But what hasn't changed is that the fundamentals, the nuts and bolts of managing the infrastructure, the technology, or the components of delivering within an organization remain fairly static. Let's put it this way. So let's say I'm going to go on this journey to an unknown place, and I need transportation to get there. Just because I'm going to a place that I don't know, I don't say, well, the car is old school, the suitcase is old school, my telephone and my flashlight and my pickaxe are all old school. I need to get rid of those and reinvent them. No, I take those things along with me and I use them in perhaps new and different ways than we have before. But those are the nuts and bolts. And within organizations, we have to tie those fundamental capabilities to our organizational governance, which is where we're driving the transformation out of, right? So it's the connection between the vision and the strategy and the ground level. Let's get some stuff done.
Governance is not, in my mind, good governance is about governing the things that must be governed and creating a series of strong pieces of autonomy in the places where they are required. You've got to allow your customer service people and your support staff and those folks who are really serving the business to be able to make decisions that they know how to make, because they're very intelligent, they're knowledge workers, they know their stuff. So governance isn't about holding the whole bag, it's about saying, what are the things we have to put in place to ensure we support their ability to have that?
Right. I think that number one, there's a couple places where we kind of get tripped up. The first is in a really hyper focus on maturity, as if if we just become more mature, we're going to do a better job in serving our customers. And the fact of the matter is that has not played out well. We've actually focused on being able to get people to raise their level of maturity. And the Gartner research that I was associated with shows that, we're in the low 2s consistently over the course of about 15 years. And with all of the focus and all of the attention, not really being able to make that move. That is just really, I think, criminal. And an indication that we should take a different tack to be able to work the issue. And the general piece of guidance that I would like to give everybody is a 3-stepper. So the first step is identify who your customers are. Who do you serve? If you can't answer that question, you're barking up the wrong tree. The second thing is, for any of the people that you serve, what do they count on you for? It could be an application, could be a service, it could be a product. Don't know, don't care, doesn't matter what you call it. And then the third question we want to ask is, how happy is your customer with the thing that you're providing them? And you can actually do that inventory fairly quickly, like in the course of one day, coming up with the list of things and doing the quick assessment. If you don't start from there, it's likely you're going to start trying to play around with technology or do something else that just isn't going to move the needle. But if I really want to change and impact the life of my customer, I'm going to start with the customer and then drive my change into the IT organization. So I know that the changes I do make are going to be timely and relevant for what they need.
So a lot of nuggets in there, and I'd like to have a quick discussion on that. So first, Greg talked about making mistakes all day and then writing about it. I just thought, what a great way to make a living, right? And so, like I tell my wife, I've made mistakes before, and I'm surely going to make more. So, pump those brakes a little bit. And the trip with the tools, and Ken's focus on maturity versus, actually getting things done. I hope you saw the difference here between terminal and instrumental value. Terminal value is like checking the boxes. Instrumental value is actually like getting things done. So Ken at the end did talk a lot about customer focus. So Jessica, I wanted to kind of put you on the spot. You're the customer experience person. What do you have to add to that discussion on customer focus and service management and digital transformation? I leave it to you.
There were so many good nuggets in this clip. There's so much to talk about. But I think on the customer side, there were a couple of things in there. And what I would pull out of that, I think the three questions are great, right? Who are our customers? What, and I love the way he put this, what do they count on us, you for? And I think that's important, right? Always turning it as opposed to what I think I want to do or into what do my customers need from me? I think that's a really kind of good way to invert that. I think that one of the things that I heard in there that I really love this is making sure that we're empowering our teams to have the room not only to innovate, but to be able to adjust to what the customer is expecting from us. And I would say less about making them happy and more about how do we get them to the outcomes they're after. What do we know what they are? Do we know what those outcomes are? And are we helping them get there? And we need to sort of have this internal view of ourselves and trust our own staff and empower them in such a way that they can answer those questions as opposed to just being told what to do.
Yeah, exactly. And Rob, I want to bring you into this conversation. Let me set you up a little bit. Since it is live TV, I'll just set you up and you run with it. Patty talked about governing the things that must be governed. So for me, the corollary is not everything needs to be governed. So as an execution officer, how do you see that kind of fitting together, governance and executing? I mean, because I'll let you run with that a little bit.
So it's hard to run with something not being governed and running with it when you have a process-oriented framework. However, I'm lucky, I guess, right? I have the opportunity to talk and meet and have a relationship with Jessica for a very long time now. And we were in the city a couple months ago, and she continues to drive this customer experience thing home for me for many, many years. But one of the comments, and I'm going to drive your point home, Frank, I promise. From the video,
no problem. You're the executioner. Go ahead.
Well, it was start with the customer and drive the changes into IT, right? And then my Jessica voice in my head, which I hear all the time. When I forget, I call her up and she reminds me about the voice of the customer, and I run with that. And I'll plug your book because our section of it is really about how to embrace that voice of the customer. But when it comes to governing that change throughout the organization, that has to be the driving force. Yeah, we keep the lights on, and that's an important part of what we do, and that's 50, 60, 70% of what we do as the organization that aren't technically driven products, right? But the voice of the customer has to take a higher priority than almost everything else. What's getting revenue through the door? And at the end of the day, it's not only the products we sell, but it's what makes their job easier, what's make their job more enjoyable, and how to keep our customer happy. Technology has a lot to do with it. If they're more operationally efficient, the bottom line gets increased. Everyone, I think, is happier in the long run. And it starts, I think, and ends with the voice of the customer. I hope I got to your answer. That is the governing and driving value for me.
Yeah, this is an interesting comment, or actually mostly a question. If it doesn't have to be governed, then are we talking about still having cultural organization or otherwise heuristics to support individual/team decision making? Well, I'll take a crack at this, and and this is a good setup for the next clip. For me, in an agile organization, there are some decisions that can be made at a very local team or individual level to promote agility. Presumably, in a mature or agile organization, you have that data or those heuristics, or maybe even some cases, gut feel to be able to make those types of decisions based on experience at what I call a local level. Jessica and Robert, and you know what? Why don't we do this? Since the next clip sets up the agile organization, let's bring Chuck in, because I see he's in the waiting room. Chuck, how you doing? Glad we overcame our technical difficulties. Chuck Papagiorgio, also one of our Institute Fellows. So, Chuck, a brief description of who you are, and then I'll put you on the spot right away to answer that question. Presumably, you were listening. Go.
Well, I'm Chuck Papagiorgio. I'm an operator consultant. I've run Entrepreneur, and I've been doing digital transformation, embarrassing to say that, for almost 3 decades now. So started with deploying technology to resolve medical research, all the way to building AI technologies to do risk management. So I've been around the block a few times. Engineer by training, geek at heart, but a business and technology executive more than anything else. So, it's hello, Michael. So it's an interesting place that we're in, right? I mean, trying to manage I know that question is a little more direct, but I want to focus on the fact that as digital transformation happens now across the organization, it's not about the IT people anymore or the technology people anymore. It's about the business. And there's a lot of research actually about the fact that the technology leadership is being challenged by line of business executives who come along with a lot of technology. So it's operationalizing all these things and making the organization respond appropriately. It's kind of a higher level initiative and objective than anything else that we've been talking about so far.
Well, that's a good setup for our next clip, the Agile Revolution. And I want you to pay attention here. I love the distinction between Agile, the methodology, Agile as an organizational mindset, and Agile, the definition. See if you agree. John, roll that clip.
The Agile Manifesto and its methodologies have been around for over 20 years now. During that time, Agile has continued to evolve. It was born in the software development space, and it quickly moved to other parts of the IT organizations through practices like DevOps and other types of operations. As other departments throughout the organization began to recognize this change in the IT department, they also have adopted these Agile concepts, sometimes almost organically. Agile marketing, Agile finance, and more. And now we talk about an entire organization becoming Agile. We're going to talk about this evolution, this revolution, over the next 30 minutes. One of our viewers, Roy Atkinson, and Roy says, or asked, do any of you see a significant difference between Agile, the methodology, and Agile, an adjective meaning nimble? I'll throw it out to either one of you. Who wants to jump on?
I can start. So I think there's a difference, I think, in the world. Sometimes people call it, uppercase A Agile, lowercase a Agile. We refer to like the Agile Manifesto, which is when we talk about Agile, those that are in the Agile space often are referring to that. And that's what we mean as the 12 principles and 4 values and things like that. So there's sort of and people view that as maybe the more formal version of it. And then there's the lowercase a Agile, which is maybe more the dictionary definition of just being nimble and adaptable and things like that. I think there are probably differences in conversation with people depending on who you're talking to. But I think the underlying intent is the same, especially when you're applying it to organizations and teams and people, is that, really we are trying to be adaptable. And so, I think there's, depending on who you talk to, there might be differences in there, but I think there's an underlying theme that's pretty similar.
I just want to add there that, I mean, I think that agile methodology is very much connected to agile frameworks, implementation of agile frameworks, for example, SAFe or similar frameworks. And it's a little bit defined by the purpose and objective of those frameworks, how they sort of work within that organization. By implementing, their kind of governance and their kind of roles and processes and routines. Therefore, you are defined as an agile company. And I think that the other part being more fast changing or nimble is maybe the more logical business explanation to what agile is.
Yeah, and I think when we talk about methodologies and frameworks, then we get into very specific ways to implement the mindset, I guess, is how I think about it, and versus sort of the dictionary definition being more about adaptable and nimble, which of course is the intent. It's just more about getting more specific about how might you go about that in a structured way and consistent way.
Yeah, you both have mentioned this mindset, this agile mindset, and I know. In the realm of digital transformation, we talk a lot about mindset, and we specifically talk about the agile mindset. So what is the agile mindset, and why does it seem it's so foundational to driving change in an organization? Hans, let's start with you.
I think that when we talk about agile transformation itself, I think the key word in that is transformation. I think the key to successful agile transformation is to get the whole organization aligned and committed to the agile principles or the agile cause in that way, meaning that the whole organization has to change. It has to see themselves as from a different perspective. It has to relearn about the logic of business, and that cannot be done by implementing a number of processes. It's about changing the culture, the way we lead, having servant leadership, having a different kind of culture, having different kind of visions about where we're going.
I totally agree with the culture side of it. That's a big part of how we approach it as well when we help organizations. And it really is about leadership. It's leaders are the ones who represent the culture and what's how we operate and what's okay around here. And so it's important to recognize that mindset shift is really about culture and behaviors. But I want to add one more thing to it, which is, oftentimes when we start thinking about, trying to put our finger on exactly what does that look like, or what does that mean, or what are the problems we see, what I find a lot of times is it's organizations that are trying to treat everything as complicated when things are complex. And simple, I guess, differentiation there. Complicated is there's lots of parts, right? But there's a way to put it together, and it's about being smarter. Versus complex is things are changing and moving, and it's about adaptability. And I think as organizations really, try to go towards an agile direction, oftentimes they're trying to do it with a complicated mindset versus recognizing that things are complex. They need to adapt rather than just be smarter.
So rather than playing the fourth clip, which talks about the agile, talks about the transformation mindset, they did talk a little bit. So these two clips so we don't need to actually get into the next clip. They kind of run together. But we talk about the transformation requires a new mindset. And in the previous agile revolution, we talked about culture. So let's have a quick discussion about culture, how you move that culture, and how that culture helps move the mindset to transformation and agility. So, Rob, give us your thoughts on that, if you wouldn't mind.
So culture is always from my perspective, a difficult thing to change, right? When everyone's in a good headspace, it's easy to change culture. When things aren't going well, people fall back to what they're comfortable with, and that becomes the proverbial crutch to get them through where they're looking to go. I was listening, I don't remember if I was listening or reading, there's like 2 or 3 books going at one time, but someone said that it's the IT's role to lead change in an organization. And we do have someone that runs continuous improvement here, and he does a really good job at it, but I think it's everybody's job to lead change. Business has to drive business value. The IT has to support that value. And it brings me back to my original comment, Frank. It's that trust that everybody has to build within each other. So even when things are difficult, we have to lead that change. And I'm a big fan of Agile. I like design model theory. My team uses that from a development perspective. If we're not constantly reinventing ourselves all the time, we're going to lose that waterfall methodology to make change. And that opportunity is going to not let it stick. So for me, it's an agile world that we have to constantly make change. And even if it's small wins, when the times are tough, it's, for me, the only way we're going to get to that disruptive change we need to grow an organization.
Yeah, I did my whole dissertation on organizational culture, and a lot of our intellectual property at the Institute is based on culture. And I always say, from a cultural perspective, leaders set the example of the behavior they want in their organization. So if you want everybody to wear a tie, you're wearing a tie. If you want everybody to wear jeans, you wear jeans. I mean, it's something as simple as that. I'd like to bring Jessica and Chuck into this. The next clip, which talked about the transformation requires a new mindset. So let's segue into a discussion with that. I'll just set it up a little bit. There's a discussion in there, or soundbite in there. We need to consider what civilization will look like when most people don't have a job. And that reference was to basically AI. So it kind of frightens me a little, the power and the possibilities. What impact have you seen AI have on organization? And what do you think the impact will be on the future of business, society, and organizational culture and society as a culture? Jessica, I set you up with that. What do you think?
I think that there's two camps on this whole AI thing. Either we're terrified of it or we're just all super excited about it, right? And I kind of sit in the middle because change always happens. We're the human species. I mean, we're just evolutionary. This is by nature who what we are. And thank goodness, right? Because there have been so many changes, if you look back in history to where we are now, that are great. Equally, there are changes that are not so great. And I think AI is going to play out that way, right? There's going to be great in it and there's going to be not so great in it. And I think when we pull that into, how does a business, look at this, it's what is the purpose of what we're doing. So what is the purpose of AI? What problem are we trying to solve? I mean, this is basic stuff, right? What problem are we trying to solve? What impact is that going to have on the culture of the organization and the customers that we serve? And is there value in making the move to AI in whatever form, you're thinking of, that's actually going to get you to that outcome you're after? Again, it comes back, in my mind, always to purpose. What is it that we're trying to do? And let's make sure that we think about all the elements that will be affected as much as we can know, and plan for that as much as we can. Adaptability has to be a factor in all. You don't have all the answers.
That's fair. That's a really great place to be. Chuck, I'm going to set you up with this. Jessica just talked about adaptability. I recall, if we go back to, say, the turn of the last century, Rockefeller was heavily into, oil refining. And there was this new product called electricity and the electric light from Edison. And Rockefeller actually tried to sabotage electricity because it impacted his kerosene business for light for the United States. And then ultimately and serendipitously stumbles upon a byproduct of the refining process, and that byproduct is gasoline. So we're talking about evolution and adaptability, and so maybe does that kind of soften my impression of AI and the future of society? I'll set you up with that. What do you think?
All right, so I'll answer that, but I'm going to take 2 minutes because go back to the agile discussion we had.
Sure.
I asked John, and John said I can go backwards for a couple of minutes. So
okay.
here's
as long as you said that.
Yeah. John said you can do that. So here's the thing: you wake up every morning, you look at the sun, you mark the position of the sun, you run the moon, you mark the position of the moon, you data, you record everything for 1,000 years. You can predict exactly where the sun would be, or where the moon would be, or where an eclipse will happen at any moment of the day, right? You've done all the fundamental data and the research. However, if your first principle is that the sun revolves around the earth, all your wonderful data is wrong, right? So the case with the agile and agile methodologies, it's the same thing. Being agile is a mindset, is a mode of operating. It is a way of collecting data, doing things. But the agile framework is a first principles framework that says if you're going to develop technology, that's the most efficient, the fastest way to do it. If your organization doesn't have the fundamental first principle of we need to be agile and we need to operate in that mental mindset, it doesn't matter what your technology does. IT is not going to lead the changing of the business. It doesn't matter how efficient or how agile your development framework is. Those two must be aligned. So I'm going to move off my soapbox on that one. And maybe you disagree or agree.
You don't have to answer my question. That's cool. We're good there, Chuck. That was a really good soapbox. Always feel free to get on your soapbox. Not a problem. So let me set up the last clip here, and it is the last clip. So all of the previous videos talked about how having the right mindset and culture is critical, but this particular video gives some pointers on how to achieve it. Roll it.
Is for us to be able to give all of you guys participating some ideas, tips, advice to help you as you try to kind of help teams motivate themselves. Digital transformation is really about organizational change, a way for an organization to reimagine their business, the way they operate, the way their people are structured, their purpose, all kinds of things. Technology, rather than being the front runner, is the enabler. Iterative changes, but really reimagining, rethinking how you run your organization.
Anytime you're going through a cultural transformation like this, I think the word culture, you have to look at it and make sure that, is there hypocrisy in the culture? In other words, are your, people executing the change, are those customer facing people, are they asked to behave in different ways than executive leadership or mid-level management does? And I think you have to make sure that everybody, is breathing that same cultural spirit, that mindset. And I think that's a healthy thing. Just a couple other things. I think it's essential that you get that customer facing component of your company, those people involved in, whatever change you're embarking on. Let them tell you their thoughts and ideas on it. Let them share their observations, because they're seeing, what the customer, how it could affect the customer in practical ways.
I think transformation has to be tied into the business goals of the company, and the business goals may change rapidly, it may change annually. So IT has to be tied into that. I think for an IT organization, it's very important to serve our customers, which is usually the whole company, but our external customers as well. And in terms of transformation, really make sure that we have the opinions of the people who will be doing the implementation, make sure they buy into the transformation, and also understand that transformation isn't always for the best technology. Because it's tied to business goals, it could be cost, it could be security. There's many reasons for transformation beyond just trying to get the best technology. Sometimes you can't have the best technology, and you have to get the team around that as well.
How you've been able to motivate people?
I think it's really going up alongside them, making sure that they're enabled, and that they've got the right tools, and that they know you're there to support them. And it's hard to fake that, whether you're on one side or the other side. And it's really, I'm a people person. I'm passionate about leadership and people development. So it's, in tough times, it's harder, obviously, than in good times to do that. But I think that, you've got to try to be the best person you can be. And we all make mistakes, I'm sure, along the way. But authenticity, I've found, is the best way. Be authentic, be open, Don't act like everything's going to be perfect and this is the best decision in the world when it's not. It's made for a reason that perhaps is not very popular. So it's about communication. And when you look at the leaders that you admire the most in the world, or in your personal life or in your business life, it typically comes down to people that are just themselves and the real deal, and really care about the people, and then care about the success.
So first, I think I was an ungracious host there, and I cut Chuck off, but on the last discussion, so I do apologize for that. But we run short on time, and sometimes I got to make a call. So I apologize to all my viewers and to Chuck especially if I cut him off. Oh, that's cool. So Jessica, this was your hosting on this particular clip, and I loved the soundbite of organizational hypocrisy, and I was just kind of wondering your thoughts on that, especially vis-a-vis culture, and then we'll come to Rob and Chuck on that, if you don't mind.
Yeah, I mean, this is pretty, I've seen it multiple times, and I think sometimes perhaps leadership doesn't realize, I'm going to assume that they don't mean to do harm, that they just don't realize the effect that they're having on the rest of the population within their organization. And I think you've got to be really in tune with that. If you're asking the organization to change, you've got to be supportive and in favor of the change, right? You can't just say you want to change. You have to really mean it and believe it. And I think that Jeff had a really good comment about the hypocrisy on that. But I think if I tie what Linda said, one of my favorite words, authenticity, if you can pull the authenticity through it as a leader, your team, your staff, your employees, your organization is going to feel that there's truth behind what you as a leader are asking, and the trust. And Robert used this word multiple times today, and I believe in it so much. You've got to gain the trust. So authenticity is a path to gaining trust. It is not the only way, but it is a path, and it's necessary for leadership to have that authenticity to kind of wrap all of that with the bow.
Yeah, that's interesting, Robert. I'll have you comment on that in a second. But my philosophy with my staff was, if I know and can't tell you, I'll tell you that. If I don't know, I'll tell you I don't know. And if I know and can tell you, I'll tell you. So I never want them to come back and say, well, you knew, but you didn't tell us. Well, I will tell them up front, I know, but I can't tell you for organizational reasons, and you'll just have to trust me. And that helped me build trust. So Robert, commenting on Jessica's reference to you, if you don't mind.
I mean, I completely agree with Jessica. I mean, being an authentic leader is critical. And Michael just popped up a comment, and the servant leadership component, being an authentic leader, the servant leadership, and then what Michael said, if you give your team members and the people around you the opportunity to pick their own journey, we'll all end up in the same place. But if they have their journey and we all agree that it's within scope, within budget, we follow the triple constraint, right? Then they own that, and they'll feel much more empowered to feel better about that journey and the solution. It makes everything a lot easier.
Excellent. And Chuck, I will give you the opportunity to back cleanup and give us the last word on this segment.
All right. So here's a perspective. There's a difference between management and leadership, right?
Yeah.
And even though I strongly believe and support the notion of authentic leadership and servant leadership, everybody's got their own leadership style. One of the biggest challenges that we have right now is sheer, I guess I'll use the word incompetence or lack of awareness of what does it actually take to manage digital transformations. Because I have come to use the word aspirational a lot, and some of my clients get angry when I say that, because I'd say, well, that sounds aspirational. They're like, well, what do you mean? We have every intention of doing it. Yeah, you do. But unless you have the management infrastructure to actually deploy that, it is purely aspirational. And the other word that I use is there's a difference between anointing a chief digital officer and appointing a chief digital officer. Anointing something just says, here, you are now, name whatever title you want, and off you go. Appointing is now you have the responsibility, there's the tools that you need, the resources that you need, and the management framework to actually execute to the role you've been appointed to. So even though we talk about authentic leadership and we talk about all those things that apply in every aspect of the companies we run, I think we also need to focus on, so what does it take to actually manage a digital transformation? Because having a whole bunch of teams out there doing their own thing doesn't always work well, right? So
yeah, kind of ties our discussion up in a nice little bow with regarding culture, governance, transformation, and leadership as a behavior rather than a position, right?
Correct.
So really cool, really cool. So I hope you enjoyed our special presentation today of Digital Dialogue, where we look back on the last 6 months. I'd like to thank my guests, Rob, Jessica, and Chuck, for being on the show today. We ran a little long, but hey, what the heck, right? And I'd also like to throw out a special thank you to John 𝗶𝗃𝗃𝗏, who produces these shows every week. I've done it once when he was away, and it's a chore back there, and I really do appreciate that, as I hope all our guests and viewers do as well. So thank you very much for joining us today. Please take a look at down there, YouTube, our YouTube channel, Institute for Digital Transformation, for all our replays of these broadcasts. We have a bunch more coming up, so look for them in the near future. And until then, thank you very much. See you soon. Ciao. Thank you for joining our Digital Dialogue. Be sure to join our next Digital Dialogue on the first and third Tuesdays of every month.